The awakening of consciousness. On the floor of the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, there is a labyrinth drawn. Let us remember the labyrinth of Crete, at whose center stood the Minotaur. It is said that Theseus was able to orient himself within that labyrinth and find the Minotaur. Afterwards, in a hand-to-hand fight, he defeated him. He was able to exit the labyrinth with the help of Ariadne's thread, which led him to final liberation. It is interesting to know that on the floor of the Cathedral of Notre Dame of Paris, a marvelous labyrinth was sketched. Undoubtedly, all of this invites us to reflect. To orient ourselves is not an easy task. The labyrinth of theories is more bitter than death itself. While some authors say that breathing exercises are extraordinary, others claim they are harmful. While some affirm one thing, others affirm the opposite. Each school believes it possesses the truth. Therefore, the labyrinth becomes very difficult. When one enters the labyrinth, one must fight hand to hand with the Cretan Minotaur. That is to say, with our own ego, with the I, with the myself, with the oneself. One can escape this labyrinth only with the help of Ariadne's thread, which must guide us toward the light. However, almost everyone becomes lost within the labyrinth of so many theories, schools, and confusions. What can we do in order to orient ourselves? Obviously, we must be interested in the awakening of consciousness. Only in this way will we be able to walk successfully within that mysterious labyrinth. Yet, as long as we do not awaken, we will remain confused. Some people feel a momentary enthusiasm for these studies, but later abandon them. Others, whose heads are full of theories, believe they have found the secret path, even though they are profoundly asleep. It seems incredible. But there are masters of the Great White Lodge, true Gnostics in the most transcendental sense of the word, who are radically awake, absolutely self-realized. In alchemical language, we would say they are individuals who possess the precious stone. Yet, they do not know how to read or write. They are completely illiterate. But they are self-realized and awake. Along the path of life, in the various schools, organizations, sects, and orders, we find people whose minds are full of theories, individuals who possess rich erudition, yet whose consciousness is completely asleep, illustrious ignoramuses, who not only do not know, but worse, do not even know that they do not know. These people, after 108 existences, enter the submerged involution of the infernal worlds. Yet they believe they are doing very well, and when questioned, they display surprising erudition. Brilliant minds with luminous, precise, and definitive concepts. But of what use is all of that? First of all, we must awaken in order to know how to orient ourselves. What good is it to have our head full of knowledge if our consciousness remains asleep? It would be better to be illiterate but awake. Undoubtedly, my dear brothers, the first thing is to recognize that we are asleep. Unfortunately, even if I affirm this, and even if you accept that you are asleep, you still do not have consciousness of that fact, and this is serious. Anyone can know that 2 + 2 = 4, but it is something else entirely to be conscious that 2 + 2 = 4. This is a simple addition that any intellectual can repeat, thinking that he knows it, that he is conscious of it. If we want to awaken, we must begin by accepting that we are asleep. When someone truly recognizes that he is asleep, it is a clear sign that he has already begun to awaken. But it is not enough to recognize this intellectually. No. Anyone can automatically say, yes, I am asleep, but it is quite another thing to be conscious that one is asleep. There is a great difference between the intellect and the consciousness. In the physical world, we must learn to create specific and intelligent associations for life in the superior worlds. During the so-called waking state, incorrectly named, we associate with people at work, at home, in the street, etc. During sleep, associations also exist, and these are the direct result of the associations we create in the physical world. If a person spends his life in a bar, obviously his associations in the inner worlds during sleep and after death will be a life in a bar, a life among bartenders and vagabonds of all kinds. If someone associates with thieves and bandits, in the inner worlds, he will live among thieves and bandits. Therefore, here and now, in the physical world, we must create the kinds of associations we wish to have during sleep and after death. It would be truly beautiful to be associated during sleep with the temple, right here, studying the mysteries of life and death. After death, it is wonderful to be dedicated to study, but that is only possible if we cultivate such associations frequently. So I repeat, we must generate the associations that we desire. We must produce the kinds of associations that we wish to have during sleep and after death. By understanding this, we will establish very strong foundations for the awakening of consciousness. We must learn how to live, my dear brothers, because the sad truth is that human beings do not know how to live, and that is truly serious. If you want, I can continue with the next section, or format it into a more modern, streamlined English suitable for a book or lecture. We do not measure time, and we believe that this physical body will last for an eternity, when in reality it lasts almost nothing, and afterwards becomes dust. The theater and the movies cause very serious damage to human beings. In ancient times, for example, in Babylon, the theater was completely objective and had as its only purpose the study of karma. That was the instruction that the audience had to receive. The actors did not memorize a role. Someone would appear on stage without knowing any script, and with sincerity, he would self-explore in order to discover what he most desired or yearned for. And that is what he spoke about. Let us suppose that he wanted to drink. Then he would exclaim, "I want to drink." Another member of the group, upon hearing these words, would immediately self-explore to see what he felt within, and according to that feeling, he would respond, "I do not want to drink. Because of alcohol, I went to jail. Because of alcohol, I live in poverty." And that was indeed what had truly happened to him. He was not allowed to say anything false, because for that purpose, they had a group of actors who appeared ipso facto. These actors would never say anything other than what they truly felt in the depths of their consciousness, nor anything they had not lived, nor anything unrelated to what the previous two actors had said. Someone else might appear saying, "I once had a lot of money, a beautiful home, a wife, children, but because of wine, look at what I am now, gentlemen." Then a poor woman would appear, another performer, "I lost my son. Because of alcohol, I lost my son, because of that damned liquor." And in this way, a drama would begin to unfold, an improvised scene that many times ended in the most tragic form. The notaries would rigorously write down not only the development of the drama, but also the final outcomes, afterwards selecting the best parts of the drama. In this way, the karmic results of a specific scene were known. There were many such scenes, scenes of war, scenes of love, but in all of them, there was spontaneity and naturalness. It was not something artificial, invented by the intellect. No. What appeared was what each actor had lived. This was the objective art of Babylon. In those times, my dear brothers, things were very different. The music correctly instructed the emotional brain. It was a special kind of music. They knew perfectly well that in the human organism, there are ganglia formed by the sounds of the universe. They knew how to utilize all of those ganglia, all those parts of the being, through musical combinations, and in this way, they educated the emotional brain. You know that a march inspires the desire to march, that funeral music makes one reflect and meditate, that romantic music brings memories of past times and nights of love. They intelligently combine sounds in order to teach the emotional center wisely. Observe how interesting this was. The center of movement also received teachings through sacred dances. Those dances were very important in Babylon. Each movement had the value of a letter, and the combination of letters formed specific sentences, theses, antitheses, and instructions. In this way, the audience received a very rich culture. It was a different kind of theater. The performers were not called artists, but orpheists, meaning people who feel with precise accuracy the activities of the essence, of the consciousness. However, after the Greco-Roman culture took hold, the theatre degenerated, the orpheists disappeared, and mechanical performers, the actors, came into being. Remember that only about 50 years ago, actors were called comedians and were regarded with much contempt. In the Middle Ages, there was a law that required actors to shave and remove any sign of masculinity. Why? First, because they had to apply makeup appropriate to the drama they were to perform. Second, because society wanted them to appear different from the rest of the population. They knew that modern actors had, let us say, a dangerous and infectious emanation, highly Hanasmasian. Being shaved and without signs of masculinity, people could avoid approaching them or shaking their hands. If you observe carefully the lives of the so-called theatre artists, and if you are a bit sensitive, you will be able to feel or perceive the kind of Hanasmasian radiations they project, which infect the minds of the people. Today, that custom has disappeared. No laws that kind exists anymore. People shake hands with them, and they are treated as equals. People even want to imitate them. Thus, they are able to irradiate their harmful Hanasmasian vibrations into the minds of everyone. It is somewhat painful to say this, because many actors earn their living through drama and performance, but we must place ourselves at the level of concrete realities. Those who are more than 50 years of age can remember that half a century ago, actors were still regarded with disdain and treated merely as comics and entertainers. Of course, they gradually improved their reputation and are now treated as equals, but that does not prevent them from irradiating vibrations that are terribly dangerous. Naturally, they memorize their roles that are entirely subjective, based on things that may or may not have existed, comedies and dramas that may have reality or may be pure invention, the products of the mind, and the honorable public sleeps terribly. When I say sleeps, I say it in quotation marks. By this I mean that the consciousness falls into a profound slumber. Undoubtedly, this kind of subjective art destroys the possibility of real perception. What is a Tuya? A Tuya is a man who can speak with his inner God face to face. However, this subjective art prevents us from reaching the state of Tuya, and for this reason it is harmful. In the name of truth, I tell you that personally, I do not like the theatre or television. When by chance I have watched television, afterward I have felt a frightful remorse of consciousness. I have had to clean my aura of the elemental creatures that were formed within it, and I cannot rest in peace until I eliminate the last of them. If you want, I can continue with the next portion of the text, or I can combine everything into a clean, continuous chapter, formatted like a book. It happens that when one watches those scenes, one automatically repeats in the mind what one is seeing. And then the essence of the mind, as Mr. Leadbeater used to say, takes form. With this essence of the mind, elementaries are created, mental forms identical to the things we watched on the screen. These elementaries steal part of our consciousness. They vampirize it. Once they are established in the mind, they cause a great deal of harm. I repeat, they steal part of the consciousness and become living creatures within us. So when I used to watch television or movies, I suffered a lot afterward trying to disintegrate the elementaries that had formed in my mind, and I could only do so after much conscious work and voluntary effort. For this reason, I renounce television and movies completely. And I tell you this so that you can guide yourselves, because if one truly wants to attain awakening, one must know how to live. If one wants to live consciously in the inner worlds and become a competent investigator of life in the superior worlds, one must create the right associations, like the one we have here at this moment. We are in a full assembly, and this is extraordinary. We are speaking about the awakening of consciousness, and that is magnificent, because we are creating extraordinary associations for the superior worlds. Now, when you go home and your bodies fall asleep in bed, naturally you will leave the body, and you will meet again just as you are gathered here tonight in the physical plane. In this same way, you will meet in the astral to do the same work, the study of awakening, and you will receive the assistance of the masters of the occult fraternity. You are creating extraordinary associations for the superior worlds. However, if you were not here, but instead in a bar or a casino or a cabaret, then tonight, when your bodies fall asleep and your essence leads the body, your inner values would also gather, but not for the study of consciousness. In this way, the consciousness continues awakening, and one day it will be completely awakened. Once consciousness is awake, we will be sufficiently prepared to see for ourselves the path that leads to final liberation. But how could we see the path if we make no effort to awaken? Can those who sleep see the path? So we must awaken. When one awakens, one understands what one is and takes inventory of what one has too much of, and what one lacks. Many faculties that we think we possess, we actually do not, and many faculties we do not know we possess, we actually have. But one can only make this inner inventory when awake. How could a sleeping person take inventory of himself? What does a sleeping person know about himself? Awakening is fundamental, vital, but to awaken, one must know how to live. It is written, "He who walks with wolves learns to howl." We must know with whom we walk. We must know what kinds of associations we create in practical life. We must know how to choose our friends, because that is definitive. As we make the effort to live intelligently, the consciousness will awaken more and more, until finally it awakens completely. Once awakened, we become aware of the unfortunate condition we are in. Normally, the human being possesses only the planetary body. What is the planetary body? The physical body with its vital foundation. Beyond the physical body, the only thing that exists is a sum of inhuman psychic aggregates, our psychological defects, taking animal-like forms: anger, greed, envy, pride, lust, laziness, gluttony, and so on. What remains after death? A collection of psychological aggregates. If we say that after death there remains a group of devils, we are not exaggerating. It is true. Call them anger, greed, envy, etc. But that is all that remains. Certainly, we do not possess a permanent center of consciousness, and unfortunately, the essence is trapped within these inhuman aggregates. Therefore, there is no permanent individuality in the intellectual animal mistakenly called man. Individuality is something that must be attained. If we want to attain individuality, we must de-egotize ourselves. Only by de-egotizing ourselves is individualization possible. And how can we de-egotize ourselves? By eliminating the inhuman elements we carry within. How can we eliminate them? Only after comprehending them. For example, we may know that we have anger, but we are not conscious of the process of anger. Anger has many forms and many causes. Anger of language, anger of the word, anger of the mind. There is anger caused by wounded self-esteem, anger caused by jealousy, attacks of anger produced by hatred, and so on. It is necessary to investigate all aspects of anger, not merely from an intellectual point of view, because the goal is not to analyze anger abstractly, but to understand our own particular anger. If we are in the street and someone insults us for no reason, and we react with anger, then it's obvious that once home, we must reflect. Why did we react that way? What was the real cause of that reaction? We must become conscious of that specific aspect of anger. And if another day we have an outburst of anger caused by jealousy, we must reflect on that jealousy. Why did it arise? In this way, we come to know all the faces of anger, and likewise with all the other defects we carry inside. Elimination is possible only with the help of the Divine Mother Kundalini. Someone may understand that they have a psychological defect and yet still continue to have it. Elimination is different. It can only be achieved with the help of Devi Kundalini. Devi Kundalini's greatest degree of power is found in sex. I am not saying that a man without a woman or a woman without a man cannot eliminate defects. Of course, they will always have the assistance of the Mother Kundalini. What I mean is that the principal strength of the Mother Kundalini is in sex, and that if someone is fortunate enough to have a wife, or a woman her husband, they can work in the forge of the Cyclops and ask Devi Kundalini for help in the very act of the work in order to eliminate the specific psychological defect that has already been understood. In this way, we are dying from instant to instant, from moment to moment. First of all, it is necessary to become aware of what the death of the I means. The basis, the foundation of any progress lies in death, because only through death can the new emerge. However, it happens that almost all esoteric students forget death and think only of perfecting themselves and of attaining powers. If one goes to the theater, it means one has forgotten death, does it not? Because when one is truly intent on dying within oneself, one does not go to the theater. One has no interest in the theater. I have never seen a dead person, a corpse in its coffin, interested in the theater. If someone is amused watching television, one is clearly showing that they have forgotten death. A corpse would never sit down to watch TV. Self-realization is something very serious and cannot be taken lightly. If self-realization is what we want, its foundation is death. We can see that in the Gnostic Church, there is always a coffin. Indeed, one of the chambers of the Gnostic Church is a funeral chamber, and in it one sees a very beautiful coffin. In the lodges, there is always a coffin. It is unfortunate that we do not have a coffin, though we should have one. In any case, the coffin, even if small, is the living symbol that we are willing to die, that it is necessary to die in order to be. We must not forget death. The monks of La Cartuja in Spain very rightly have a special greeting. Brothers, in order to die, we live. And the other monk replies, brother, that is something we already know. That is their greeting. We are not concerned with the death of the physical body. We can lose that body simply walking out of the house, or even inside the home, falling out of bed, etc. What matters to us is the death of the I, that I we carry inside that makes us something horrible. If you were awake, you can verify what I am saying. The radiations that every person carries who has the I are like those of Count Dracula, sinister. When I am alone in meditation and someone who has the I approaches, I feel his vibrations from far away. They are sinister, unpleasant, left-handed, like those of Count Dracula. The I makes us truly filthy in the fullest sense of the word. Thus, when one achieves the elimination of the I, the disintegration of all those inhuman elements that we carry within, one ends up radically awake, 100%. However, it is also necessary to clothe ourselves with the superior existential bodies of the being. A certain instruction I received some nights ago comes to my memory. I had to live a very interesting event in the astral world. The venerable masters created a scene of persecution, even though I was conscious. Suddenly, while in a house, I was visited by the venerables of the occult fraternity, and they taught me by singing beautifully. They told me that the persecution of the law, I am not speaking of the laws of this world, ends when one is well dressed and has a very good car. If one is well dressed, has a good car, and a good sum of money, the persecutions must end. I am speaking in a language you must understand. What is the car the venerables were referring to? The chariot of Merkaba. That chariot is formed by the four bodies, the physical, astral, mental, and causal bodies. That is the car. And when you hear in Kabbalah speak of the chariot of Merkaba, they are referring to the four bodies. What do we understand by someone well-dressed with an expensive car? One who has created the superior existential bodies of the being, and more, one who has Christified them. That is a well-dressed man. And what does it mean to have money in the wallet? To have cosmic capital. That capital is earned by doing good deeds, by working for humanity. It is obvious that a master like Count Saint-Germain or Jesus of Nazareth cannot be persecuted. How could the lords of karma pursue them? Who would dare pursue Jesus of Nazareth? They pursue the unfortunate, who are poorly dressed, walking on foot, with problems and without money. Who is the unfortunate? The indigent, poorly clothed, the beggar, the one who has not created the superior existential bodies of the being. They are the victims of the law. You can see them going around everywhere, always in misfortune. They are born not knowing why and die the same way, always blindfolded, from cradle to tomb. They marry, have many children, live in the most wretched poverty, always unhappy, always persecuted. When one is well dressed, has a beautiful car and money in the wallet, the persecution ends. Who could persecute the famous Count Cagliostro? Not even the famous Louis XV. They imprisoned him in the Bastille, but do you think such a man remained imprisoned there? A man who mastered the jinn states, he must have been there for a short time. A little while in Rome, Paris, London, everywhere except the Bastille. 2 months later, when he left, he came out full of gold and diamonds, smiling and happy. 10,000 people carried him on their shoulders. He was a success, was he not? They say he was imprisoned and died in jail, but that is false. No one knows what became of Count Cagliostro. What can we say of Count Saint-Germain, Altotas, the great initiate? He is still alive, ever victorious, never defeated. So brothers, let us dress well, and everything will change. Let us have a beautiful car, and life will be better. Obviously, we must create that car. We will begin with the astral body, and to do so, it is necessary to make use of the sacred sperm. If those poor people would stop dreaming, how different life would be. The 4 Gospels insist on the necessity of awakening the consciousness, but because they are written in code, no one understands them. Unfortunately, ordinary people do not appreciate the value of the sperm, and they waste it and expel it from the organism miserably. In the sperm is the power with which they could change their entire life and become gods, but they spill it. They ruin and condemn themselves to misfortune. However, if the sperm is transformed into energy, everything changes, because it is with the most subtle energy of sex that we are going to fabricate the astral body. Once that body has been created, we can travel with it consciously and positively. One knows that one has an organ when one can use it. We know we have hands and arms because we move them. We know we have feet because we walk with them. This is obvious. In the same way, when one has the luxury of having created an astral body, one knows one possesses it because one can use it and move with that body in a positive and dynamic way. The same happens with the mental body. It must be created through the transmutation of the sperm into energy. People do not have an individual mind. We need to create an individual mind. And this is possible only through the transformation of the sperm into energy. Finally, we need to create the body of conscious will so that we can command circumstances. Whoever is a victim of circumstances does not possess the body of conscious will. One must learn to create circumstances so that circumstances do not influence us. Whoever is still influenced by circumstances is like a log tossed about on the stormy waters of the ocean. A victim of calamities. One must learn to create circumstances, and this is only possible by creating the body of conscious will. That body is created by the transformation of the sperm into energy. It is with that very subtle energy of the being that we will create this body. These 4 bodies, physical, astral, mental, and causal, form the carriage. Once the carriage is formed, all that is needed is the driver. Who is the driver of that carriage? Our own being. But the being will not enter into a carriage that does not exist. When we receive the being, he is like a lord in his carriage, a well-dressed lord, riding in a magnificent carriage and clothed in the superior existential bodies of the being, clothed in sacred vestments. He who possesses these bodies must yearn for something more. He must Christify them. The Christified bodies are extraordinary. Every Christified person is truly a well-dressed lord, who is no longer a victim of circumstances, and no longer pursued by the laws of destiny. He becomes a lord in the fullest sense of the word. In ancient times, humanity lived according to certain principles that allowed them to preserve the physical body until the moment they had created the superior existential bodies of the being. But in that epoch, humanity fulfilled its cosmic duty. What is the cosmic duty? To live always awake. A person who reads a book at 500 kilometers an hour and says, "I already know this book," is ruining his intellectual brain. He is not fulfilling the cosmic duty. In the name of truth, I tell you, when I study a book, I reflect deeply on each paragraph. I meditate on it, and I do not proceed to the next one until I have become conscious of that paragraph. If I have not taken consciousness of it, I do not continue. One must become conscious of what one reads. This is part of the cosmic duty. Let us observe the emotional center. It is absurd to allow oneself to be carried away by violent emotions. In the bullfighting arenas, one can see scandalous scenes. Women in the heat of their passions throwing their undergarments and shoes at the bullfighter as if they were crazy. Men committing barbarities and then carrying the bullfighter on their shoulders as if he were a great lord when he is nothing more than a poor fool. At soccer games, one can see horrendous situations. Many times the players end up in a battle. Why? If we examine the reason, we find it is stupid and absurd. Some justify soccer by saying, "Soccer is a heritage of our ancestors, and that the Aztecs played it." Others claim, "This is where they sold the offerings." False. The ball represented the sun, and when they played that game, they were representing the fight between light and darkness in a carefully studied ritual movement. Let us observe the square on the floor before the altar. The white and black squares represent the battle between light and darkness. In the same way, the Aztec ball game was a liturgy studied in advance. Every movement was related to the liturgy. There were no random movements. All were predetermined. By means of those movements, they symbolized the struggle between the powers of light and darkness. There existed a similar game in the Gothic cathedrals of medieval Europe. That game was played within the cathedrals and was part of the liturgy, directed by the priest to symbolize the battle between the forces of light and darkness. But that foolish game of modern soccer has no tradition, except that it began when a poor fool from England one day had the idea to inflate an animal bladder and cover it with a piece of leather. He sewed it and began to play with it. After a few days, people complained, newspapers, ladies, etc., because the hats and windows of houses were being destroyed by those balls. The police intervened, but it was impossible to eliminate that vice, which spread throughout the world, and now it is considered a serious game. To make serious the silliness of a vagabond who had no job in London, that is truly absurd. Inverential peace, Samael Aun Weor.